Welcome to the Fishcast. This week, Corey Long, Fish, and Coach Demo are going to break down the Florida Gators and what expectations are coming out of spring football. In segment 2, Coach Demarest will be here to break down the differences between a gap 1 and 2 gap defense. In segment 3, we will go over recruiting. The 2022 talent on the D line may be the best in the history of the state of Florida. In the final segment, we will go over Coach Deion Sanders' success at Jacksonville State, Coach Miles' problems at Kansas, and finally, the eyes of Texas. What is going on in Austin?
Welcome back for another episode of the Fishcast. I am here, Corey Long. I am a co-host. Joining me, as always, is the Director of Talent Evaluation, Recruiting, and Scouting for Elite Scouting Services, Charles Fishbein.
It's Fishbein, but it's okay.
Fine, Fishbein.
Oh my God.
Tomato. I say it both ways.
That's why I go by Fish.
Yeah,
since I've been since grade school, people have been butchering it from fish pole to fish pond to fish.
Why do we call it fish pole?
Because people know that it doesn't say.
Fish bean.
Yeah, they don't care.
Okay,
Yeah, it's an easy name to pick on. That's why I'm called Fish and my son's Little Fish.
Little Fish, exactly. I call him Ethan though, so I call him Easy E. That's what I call him. And also joining us, as always, the former linebackers and secondaries coach for Hawaii, North Carolina State, Rutgers, among others, Chris Demarest. How you doing, Coach Demo?
Good. It's actually Demarest, but I go by Demo.
You know what? Y'all gonna introduce yourselves next week. How about that? How does that go?
You can call me what you want, Corey.
It's not good. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're going to start this week off by talking about the Florida Gators, who kicked off their spring football a few days ago. The Gators are an interesting team. They coming off of an 8-4 season where they won the SEC East, made the SEC championship game, gave Alabama a spirited game. Pretty much half the team opted out of the bowl game, and they got blown out by Oklahoma. But they're losing a lot. I mean, you're talking most likely 3 first-round picks when you talk about – at least 2 first-round picks when you talk about Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney. And you got Kyle Trask, quarterback, who's also going to get drafted, who's, been around the team for 4 years, was a 2-year starter. They're very young on offense, and what I've heard so far, what you've heard, is that, the youth is showing early in spring, both on the offensive line and at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, this is expected. You lose a quarterback like Trask, who had one of the best seasons ever for a Florida Gator quarterback. This was expected. I mean, pretty much anybody that followed Florida knew that passing-wise, they were going to struggle this year. I still think they're going to put up big stats just because Mullen's such a great coach. But their offense is going to change. I think it's going to be a little more of like what you saw at Mississippi State with, Nick Fitzgerald, who was a quarterback, kind of the similar type of player to Emory Jones, very good athlete. Inconsistent as a quarterback. I think Emory's that guy. I mean, Emory's shown that he can throw the ball, I think, down the field, but he's inconsistent, but his strength is, running the ball. They got three very good running backs in Naquan Wright, Damian Pierce, and Malik Davis coming back. I haven't heard anything really from the DeMarcus Bowman camp in the first week or so. I don't know if he's there, if he's being held out. If he's having issues off the field, I really don't know if it's just one of those Lakeland things, but, they're going to rely on their run game. We've talked about it. We'll go over it more. The Nick Elksness kid had an impact early in camp, supposedly, which is not surprising. They're going to be very good at tight end again, even though they lost Pitts. They need to find some weapons outside at receiver. But overall, I think this is a very good Gator team. I don't see them not winning at least 9 or 10 games again this year. Now, that may not be up to the expectations of the Gator fans, but this team does have a lot of players to replace.
You know, there's always a mystique about the University of Florida Gators. I was able to play against them and fortunate enough to be at Florida State University and go 2-0 against them in my 2 years there. But there was always a mystique about them, you know, whether it was their facilities, whether it was the amount of money they have to be able to recruit, budget, etc. There was always something about the Florida Gators. You know, we played Miami and we always kind of knew what we were going to get with Miami, you know, but we never really, the Gators were just something different. They had athletes, they had toughness, they had a little bit of everything. But I think it always came down to coaching. Steve Spurrier was a great coach. I think Urban Meyer did his thing there, and now it's up to Mullins. And I think he's capable of doing the same things and winning a national championship there. But there's always something about the mystique of the Florida Gators, and they could either come into the game and blow you out, or they could you be in a battle just to try to win the game. But it always comes down to coaching at that university.
Now, I'm curious. The big question mark for me is a quarterback. Emory Jones has been there the longest. He's had the last 2 years. Dan Mullen has gotten him work in many games, gotten him, different looks, different series, things of that nature. I never got the impression that he was the guy, though. I never got the impression that they thought he was the future. I kind of like the kid behind him a little bit more, Anthony Richardson, but I'm also a little surprised that they didn't hit the transfer portal and get a quarterback. What do you think?
I just think Mullen believes in his ability to develop quarterbacks. He's proven it over and over. You look at what he did at Mississippi State. Like I said, I mean, Dak Prescott wasn't a heavily recruited guy. He developed him, and then all of a sudden he brings in Nick Fitzgerald, who was inconsistent, but he got a very good season out of him, and he also got the Florida Gator job because of his development of the Mississippi State players. And what he did with Kyle Trask was, I don't believe he ever started a high school game. What he did with him, and he wasn't his quarterback. He came in with the prior coach. He did a great job. And you look at Richardson and Emory Jones, I think he sees a lot of ability in these two guys, and he believes in his ability to develop quarterbacks. And he probably doesn't want somebody from another team that maybe he feels these guys know too much, and it's easier to just build a guy up from the bottom up instead of trying to take somebody else's kid to build up. And I think he's got a couple guys there that are pretty good. I watched the Del Rio kid last year at the Miami camp, or it's probably been 2 years now since COVID. He was a very talented guy. These guys all have ability. I don't think he's got a problem with talent. He's just got to find one of these guys and put them out there and build them. And he did that with Trask, so we'll see what happens.
I know you guys are talking about personnel, but like I say, there's something about Florida. Over my career, I lost about 4 or 5 players that I recruited to Florida. And it was always that last weekend of recruiting. I don't know what they do up there or whatever, but there was something about the University of Florida Gators mystique. I was holding my breath a few weeks ago when last week, we talked about Richard Washington. I was holding my breath when he went up there for that last weekend for the visit, but we were able to keep him, and I was able to get him to come to NC State. But there's always something about the Florida Gator mystique. And it always comes down sometimes to that last weekend. I'm like, where did they come from? How did he end up going there? And that's what they end up doing, no matter who was the coach. So I always think about Florida as being a place that could absolutely win a national championship. And it's going to come down to, and as always does, a quarterback and then being surrounded with great weapons.
Well, the roster is loaded with talent. I mean, I know we've talked about it. Last year, I felt they pulled in the number 1 corner in the state in Jason Marshall. They pulled in Corey Collier. They bring in players. Even when Spurrier was there, while Spurrier didn't love recruiting, they still landed elite kids across the board. Muschamp did a very good job recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. McElwain brought in guys. Every coach that's been there has had success bringing in talent. You've never really seen them have a lack of talent on their roster. Even when Ron Zook was there, part of the reason, Urban Meyer won right away was because the talent that Zook brought in.
That's right.
It's a school that recruits itself. They have the money and finances to bat. If they feel they make a mistake on a coach, they're able to buy the guy out. They're going to win at that program no matter what. And Mullen has proven year after year that worst case scenario, he's going to win 9 games. And most years he's going to win at least 10 or 11. And he's a champion. There's people that are arguing right now whether he's a championship level coach, that he can win a national championship. He won a Florida national championship. Now, he wasn't the head coach, but a big reason why Meyer won there was because of him and why he had so much success at Utah. The guy's a winner. It's just right now, and I think Corey and I discussed this, they're in a conference with an animal named Alabama that everybody in that conference has to deal with. And you have to go through Alabama to win a national championship. And it's kind of unrealistic because they're recruiting at 10 levels higher than all these other programs. So I just think that he's going to consistently win his 9, 10, 11 games. And he's going to pop a team one year that's going to end up coming out of nowhere. And there's very low expectations this year in Florida because they lost so much. And I think that's where Dan Mullen's his most dangerous, is when you doubt what he can do. And Spurrier kind of was the same way. He had a lot of teams that, they popped up. I mean, this is a team that probably makes a run at another SEC championship game. There's no guarantees that Alabama wins it all this year because they're replacing a lot of guys. And we know they recruit at a high level. But all he has to do is get to the SEC championship game again this year, and anything can happen in that game. He proved it this year. He gave Alabama their best game. Now, do they stink it up in the bowl game? Yeah, but they had like half their team out. And it was basically a meaningless bowl game for them. And while Oklahoma had a lot to prove, they wanted to beat a SEC team, and that's what happened. But I really believe he will have another good team, and those doubters, the people that doubt that he's going to produce this year, are going to be wrong again.
I can't, there's not really a rebuild year at Florida. I'm going to say this is a transition year, mainly because I don't think they have enough explosive weapons on offense to hang. Like I just, everything that they did last year, they had a quarterback who was up for a Heisman Trophy. They had, a tight end that was part of the Heisman mix. They had all these great, they had Tony, they had Copeland, they had all these, they had the other kid from Grimes. They had all these, great receivers. They really had a loaded team last year. So when I look at it, I think they're going to win a lot of games. The SEC East is pretty weak outside of Georgia. You got South Carolina and Tennessee with new coaching staffs. Vanderbilt's never any good. Kentucky is sort of maxed out for what they're going to be. Missouri is, going in second year with their coaching staff. So, I know they got LSU on the other side. I'm not sure what else they have on the other side. So, it's not that hard, but do I think that they're going to beat Georgia this year? No. I think at least Georgia figured out they can't just throw any old walk on at quarterback now. So if they can keep JT Daniels upright, they're probably the best team in the East. A lot of talent. I'm definitely looking to see if their defense has a bounce back year. I mean, last year it was all offense. This year they're going to really rely on the other side of the ball to keep scores a little lower, to generate turnovers, to generate sacks, to, generate negative plays. Last year they had nothing. They had nothing in terms of pass rush. I mean, they lost their 2 guys coming off the edge of the draft, and that proved to be their biggest issue because they just gave up yards by the pound last year.
Is that number 1 coming back next year, or is he graduating from Florida?
Number 1 on the wide receiver?
Yeah.
Tony is done. Tony
That
is
that guy's the real deal.
yeah,
He's
he's
like a Tyreek Hill, man. He's unbelievable.
yeah, very
You know,
talented player.
he's a
Amazing.
talented dude. But year in and year out, that's why I believe in my heart the SEC is the best college football conference there is. Period, bar none. Year in and year out. I mean, they're set up by their own. They've already come out and said we're going to have all our stadiums to full capacity next fall, regardless. I mean, they're ahead of the ball game. They've already said that they're going to do it, and because they'll pack their stadiums too. I mean, that's how talented that conference is. But when you got a taste like the University of Florida and you play in the swamp and you have an opportunity to either go to the swamp and watch a game there or coach against them or play what have you, that place is special. And it started with Spurrier. And I just think this guy Mullins can do it, but he has to have a quarterback. There's no doubt. The quarterback will set the tone for that entire team.
Yeah. Once again, like we could go over, they once again had, their class was ranked 13th overall. I think you could argue that that's probably underranked for last year. They bring in a lot of guys that just can play. There's a kid, Marcus Burke, out of Trinity Christian. You could argue he was the number one receiver in the state of Florida last year. Most of the networks had 3 or 4 guys. This is a kid that ran, 10, 300 meters. He's 6'3", he's 180. Typical Florida kid, undervalued. When you're that size and you can stretch the field, you don't need a great quarterback. As long as that guy can push the ball down the field, the guy's going to make plays. I just think to doubt them as a program, it's silly. They're
not doubting them. I'm just saying they're not going to win the SEC East next year.
No,
Doubting them?
I mean,
a damn good team.
Well, Georgia's out recruited them. Georgia's recruiting at the level of Alabama. They're the closest program outside of Clemson, Ohio State. There's like 4 programs. I mean, Georgia's recruited at a level when you start to see they're landing 5, 6, 7, 8 5-star kids and everybody else is a 4-star kid. And we could argue over rankings. I think rankings are a lot better now than they were even back when Demo was at Florida State. There's so many eyeballs on these kids that if 4 or 5 of us agree on a kid, the odds are that kid's going to be probably pretty good. And Florida's going to probably not win the SEC East, but they're the second best team in on that side at worst, in my opinion. I don't think Tennessee's in year 1 with their coach. Some of these other programs on that side are not nearly as good. So we'll see. I mean, I think they'll win at least 9 games next year with the potential to win 10 games with the bowl game. And that's a good year. I remember when Spurrier first got there, Florida Gators and their fan base, their expectation was, hey, let's win the SEC. That was their expectation every year. If they won against Florida State or lost, it was always, if they lost against FSU, it's like, well, we have the SEC to worry about. Once Spurrier won that national title and then Urban Meyer won 2 national titles, the expectation of that fan base became even more extreme. They felt like, hey, we're a national power. We should play for titles every year. And it's just, especially right now with Alabama at the level they are and the level that Georgia's recruited at a ridiculous level, it's just very hard to believe that you're going to compete year in and year out for national titles. I think you got to set the bar a little lower. And I know that's hard for these fan bases to do, but sometimes that's your ceiling year in and year out is 9, 10, 11 wins. You go to a good bowl game. There's only about 5 teams right now heading into next year that really have a legit shot at making the playoffs. That's the way it is. And until they, until the big bad bear leaves Alabama, Florida's going to be a program that once every 3 or 4 years, they'll have a shot to knock them off. And that's just where they're at right now,
Yeah, I agree. You talked about Georgia, and I love Georgia. I love Atlanta area kids. I think Georgia got great football. But let me tell you something, man. When you get a group of Florida kids together, and they're got the momentum, and they're playing with their swag, and they really have confidence, and they're talented kids, and you got them together, they're very difficult to beat. I'll tell you a quick story. I was coaching at Florida State at the time. We were playing Georgia Tech, and there was a kid from New Jersey that was playing for Georgia Tech. He was a punt returner, receiver, running back kind of kid from up this way. And I was talking to him the other day, and he says, man, when we played Florida State and those Florida kids came out and started giving me the business, he goes, they were the only ones that could really, really intimidate me. He goes, nobody else could do it, but those Florida kids could do it. And that's why, I hear you talking about Georgia, and I think it's great. And they're going to do some great things, and they got great talent. But when this Florida team, or Miami or Florida State, but we're talking about Florida right now, if they click on all cylinders and they playing with the Florida swag, they're very difficult to beat.
Well, all right. We'll quickly run through the schedule real fast. They open up the season hosting a Florida Atlantic. Feel pretty good about that. They actually take a road trip, wink, wink, to Tampa to play South Florida. Feel pretty good about that too. Season starts. They open up the SEC with a home game against Alabama. That's interesting. You're catching Bama at about the time that you want to catch Alabama. 3 games this season when they've got a lot of new parts. So both teams have a lot of new parts. So after that, Tennessee, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, feel pretty good about all those. At LSU is going to be tricky. Georgia, obviously, they get Georgia after a bye week, which I think helps. Then they close out their season in November with South Carolina, Samford, Missouri, and Florida State. Like I said, I don't see less than 9 wins off that schedule, but you could point at the Alabama, LSU, Georgia games and say they're going to be underdogs in those games. So 9 wins is probably, something can happen and 8 wins could be the floor, but the floor isn't lower than 8 wins.
No way. Nah. I don't think so. He's too good of a coach. And they got too many players to fall below that. But yeah, it comes down. Listen, they beat Georgia last year. LSU game. Do those games flip? Do they beat LSU this year and lose to Georgia this year? Those are 50-50 games. We talked about it. They really only have 3 50-50 games or lesser odds. The Alabama game, the LSU game, the Georgia game. The rest of the games are at least 60-40, 70-30. Like they're going to be at least 7 to 10 point favorites in most of the rest of the games, if not more than that. So they're looking at 9 wins, and considering that they're losing their starting quarterback, they're losing their best receivers, they're losing their best tight end, they're losing their best O lineman from last year, they're losing a couple guys up on the D line. It's not a bad it's not a bad off year to have to win 9 or 10 games. Now, like I said, their expectations are, that's not good enough. But I think a lot of programs would like that in an off year to win 9 or 10 games.
I agree. And 9 wins will probably get them to a New Year's Six bowl. And I'm going to end this by saying credit to them for taking a road trip to South Florida. They don't have to do that. And the fact that they're going to take a trip to Tampa, I think is when one of the big 3 takes a trip to one of the secondary 3 or 4, as we call it, I think that's a big deal. So good for them. Good for them for taking that trip. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to have some coach speak. We're going to talk some good old nerd football, talk about schemes and gaps and coverage and that stuff. We'll be back. We're back to talk some schemes, some gaps, some coverages, nerd football, as I like to say. Big thing is the gap schemes. And the one thing I hear a lot, Coach, I hear 2 gap schemes. This was something that different people used. I think apparently the old Miami coordinator D'Onofrio used a 2 gap scheme. Their current head coach Manny Diaz, who's a famed defensive coordinator, uses more of a 1 gap scheme. What is a 2 gap scheme? What is a 1 gap scheme?
Okay, a lot of times when you run a 2 gap scheme, your scheme defensively is usually a 3-4 scheme. So what happens is that means your nose guard is head up the center, and your 2 tackles are head up their tackles. So what that means is that unless you're slanting and angling into a gap, On the snap of the ball, those down linemen attack the lineman in front of them, and then they fit to whatever gap they see, and the linebackers are required to fit off of them. So when a nose guard strikes the center, he can actually push them back and actually come off to the side that he believes where the ball's going, and the linebacker has to fit behind him. Okay. And you get very rare guys can do that, the two gap scheme. Virginia did it years ago. That's why Golden did it down in Miami, because that's what they did at Virginia. But you have to have a heck of a nose guard that's strong enough, quick enough, fast enough to be able to do that. Now, when you go back to the one gap scheme, that means you're shading the nose or shading the guard or shading the tackle inside or outside. And at the snap of the ball, that's the gap that you have. So the linebackers, for the most part, are already predetermined what gaps they have. Now, as I said a few segments ago, a few weeks ago, one of the segments, a lot of linemen don't sit there anymore. They move. So they might be showing this shade in this gap, but they move on a snap of the ball to this shade or this gap. And now it has to be coordinated with the linebackers, so the linebackers to know they have to fit opposite. So basically between a two gap and a one gap scheme is basically the fit of the linebackers, but you need to have some guys up front that really can control the line of scrimmage and fit where they see the ball's going. So the opposite of fit is for the linebackers, where in a predetermined gap scheme, whether it's you're lining up here and holding that gap or slanting and angling and moving to a different gap, it's pre-coordinated with the linebackers so they know what gaps to fit. Because when it's all said and done in a run game, it's all about the fit of the linemen and the linebackers.
Now, Coach, my question to you is, in these schemes, in this two gap, one gap, where does your pass rush come from? Where are you looking at? Is this a situation where in a two gap scheme you're using a lot of different design, maybe some blitzes, stunts, whereas in a one gap scheme you're using a little bit more of your natural pass rush, trying to get guys coming off from the edge? Where does the pass rush come from?
See, a lot of times in the two gap scheme, as I said before, it's a 3-5. Not necessarily, but it could be. So your extra rusher either comes from a blitz, whether it's an inside linebacker and an outside linebacker, to add that 5-man blitz. And a lot of those they could be run blitzes as well, but they also can be in the passing game, like you just described. It comes from an extra player, where a lot of times if you're in the one gap scheme, a lot of times you're in 4 down linemen, not all the time, but 4 down linemen. So you're naturally bringing that 4th man in the rush, and his hand is usually on the ground. Although a lot of 4-3 teams have gone to the stand-up defensive end, opposite of the tight end to the open end side. But majority of the time, to answer your question, Corey, in order to get the pass rush, because you're only going to bring 3 guys, either comes from that inside linebacker position or maybe one of those outside guys.
All right. So when you're in these gap schemes, what are you running out in the secondary? Are you running your base stuff where you got a couple outside corners and you got your safeties? Do you do kind of, I remember FSU used to have what they called a field corner and a boundary corner, where you had kind of one corner that was in charge of your outside and the other one was more in charge of the short stuff in the perimeter. What are you doing with your secondary in these schemes?
Everything you do is determined on your front 4 or front 3. If they're war daddies and they can make things happen, you can do a lot of different things. But if they're not as good, you have to protect them. Then you're limited to the amount of things you can do behind. Like when you watch an NFL game, it's always 4-3 cover 2, 4-3 cover 2. Well, a lot of the NFL teams can stop the run with 7 guys. Okay, that means they get 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers. They can stop the run because they're that talented. When you get to college, a lot of times, that extra run defender usually comes from the secondary. So that limits the amount of coverage that you can play. Okay, because when you play with 2 high safeties, then your corners technically have to be run support guys in a cover 2 to help with that. But if you're in a 1 safety high, 1 single high, then one of those safeties are rocking down into the box to give you that 8th man to cover to help with the run game. So it depends on what kind of lineman you have in the game will determine what kind of coverage you can play behind it. Can you keep 2 high safeties and stop the run with 7 guys? or do you always have to bring an eighth man down into the box to stop the run? And that's where you get the single high safety. So a lot of times, secondary wise, it all depends what you play according to the ability of your front.
More than ever, I see teams they're running. Their base defenses are now nickels. They're running with 5 defensive backs out there, whether they're running a 4-2-5 or a 3-3-5. How does that? How does running a nickel base work within these gap schemes?
Okay, why did they go to that? Because offenses started spreading you out, right? So instead of the tight end two backs, which is called 21 personnel, all of a sudden now they're going to one back, four wides, which is called 10 personnel. Now you could say to yourself, my linebacker's talented to go out in space, or do I need to get him out of the game and bring a nickel back in, more of a safety corner type kid, and put him out there and be able to play him better in space? Because what they're doing in football now, Corey and Fish, is everything's predetermined in space. Can a guy miss somebody in space and pick up extra yards, okay, even if somebody's unblocked? Or can a defender come up and make a tackle in space on a guy, and that will sure say to that defender, he can play that outside position. So a lot of times the run fits are pretty much the same, Corey, because what happens is when you bring two backs in there on the tight end, you have an extra gap. Once you go to bring that one back out of there, you go to a one back set, you really don't have an extra gap to defend. So now it can be single gap protection. So that's what's happening with a lot of these nickel backs when they bring them in. It's because the offenses have evolved to spreading you out across the field.
Now you've been in really three, like I like to say, three kind of totally different styles of football. When you were at Florida State as a GA and later at later at NC State, you were in that Chuck Amato, Mickey Andrews world, which I'm assuming is one gap. They did 4-3. They put the corners out on an island. When you went to Rutgers, Northeast football, a little bit more power. And obviously when you're at Hawaii, where everybody spreads everybody out, and they're throwing the ball 50, 60 times a game. What were the different adjustments that you made in these different areas, and what schemes work best? What schemes tended to work best with what teams, depending on the team that you were with?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, who are you playing that week and what is their tendencies and what do they like to do? You have to stop their bread and butter. So if their bread and butter is a running game and they have two backs in there, then you design your defense around a two-back offense. If you go to a one-back offense, then you design your defense around stopping the run and then defending the pass with the one-back. Now, there's a lot of ways teams can get back to a two-back. They can motion a guy in. They can bring a guy in from receiver-wise and shift him back to a tight end, or bring him as an H-back, or motion him back in to create two backs. So you got to be prepared and ready for that, because you see a lot of that when a back is out wide, then he motions back into the back. So what happens is it changes the complexity of the defense, because now you have to defend certain things on the offensive side of the ball that they're showing you. So I think, Corey, what you do is you prepare each week, okay, a game plan depending on the film that you see that the other team runs, whether it's two backs, one back, H back, etc. And that will determine your game plan defensively.
It seems so much more reactive these days on the defensive side of the ball than it used to be. I mean, because like I said, you grew up in the Mickey Andrews, Chuck Amato school of defense, and I never got the feeling that those defenses cared what the other side was doing. The object was, could you stop the FSU pass rush? And most
Correct.
teams couldn't stop their defensive line, so it didn't matter. It didn't matter what they were running. It didn't matter if they ran 11 personnel, 10, 21, 22, 5 wide. Their quarterback was going to get destroyed more than likely.
It goes back to what I said earlier. If you have four war daddies up front, then you can do certain things in the secondary, because those guys not only will stop the run, but they'll also add to the pass rush. So if you have four guys being able to put pressure on the quarterback, then you have to tell your secondary, you only have to cover for 2 seconds. Because if you start covering for 3 and 4 seconds, that's hard to do with the talent of the receivers are this day and age. So if you can say, hey, listen, we'll put pressure on the quarterback when he passes, you got to bump and run or play man-to-man for 2 to 3 seconds, 2.5 seconds most, then you have a chance to be successful. And that's what you're able to do when you have a front four, or if you blitz, to be able to make sure that blitz hits home.
Fish, Yeah, I'll wait for fish to kiss.
Hey, listen,
I'm
He
sorry.
was
listen.
eating.
No, I wasn't eating. I was honestly, I just like listening to you guys talk football. This is this is Demo's, expertise. I find the players to fit whatever scheme you want. You want to talk scheme with me, good luck, man. Let me go find the players and, at the end of the day, you figure it out where you're going to put them. But I always find it interesting to listen because the craziest thing is I truly believe at the end of the day, you can run any scheme you want. You could be the greatest coach in the world. If you don't have the players, the scheme's not going to work. I just that's my opinion. I'm sure there's some coaches. There's a lot of good coaches that have probably been at these schools that get beat down every week that are probably really good X's and O's coaches, but they're running guys out there that can't play. It's like, I remember, when Demo first got to Rutgers, he had a lot of guys that just couldn't play. And no matter what they ran, some teams just had better athletes, better players, better, like there's some, you could figure, I believe this, and maybe Demo could back me up on this. I think for one game, maybe 2 games, and that's why you see it, with Wake Forest, and they'll have 6, 7, 8 game wins in a season, but they'll never win, 12, 11, 12, is because at the end of the day, once teams have film on you and they find your weaknesses, it doesn't matter what scheme you run. You can hide stuff for 1 game, maybe 2, but over a 12 game schedule, you better have players because the other team's going to figure out what you're doing, where your weakness is. And it's crazy. I always go back to this thing. I was invited up to Auburn one year, and they had just played FSU in the national championship game. And Damian Craig was showing me this one play, and they had this one running back that they moved out to slot, and their whatever system they used, I think they use Exos technology, whatever they used basically told them that when this guy came in the game in that package, they ran him 90% of the time. He got the ball on a jet sweep. So what happened was Pruitt, and I'm sure Florida State figured this out. Oh, well, what we're going to do is when he comes across, they brought Jalen Ramsey down to the line of scrimmage, and they blitzed Jalen Ramsey, and basically they caught him off guard because FSU's information told them, hey, 95% of the time they do this with that personnel. And Demo talked about this with, I believe we talked about it with McKinley a while back. High school is a little different because teams don't have packages in personnel. You could kind of figure out based on what they bring in personnel wise, what a team's going to run. Most teams and most coaches are predictable. They're going to run basically certain plays out of those schemes. Now there's some guys that are really creative, but you look at Lincoln Riley. He laughs. He has his play cards, or the mad pirate at Mississippi State. They got a play sheet that's all the things are on an index card. They don't run a lot of plays because, heck, they know their players are better than the guys on the other side. Hey, my third receiver is better than that third DB, and I don't care what scheme you run. My third receiver, and that's how Florida State, Florida, Miami used to beat up on teams. Is they said, all right, you can run whatever you want, but my third and fourth receiver are so much better than your third and fourth DB. We don't care what you run. Our guys are better than your guys. We're going to beat you.
See, there's no mystery that great players make you a great coach. Coach Bowden would say it all the time. Great players make you a great coach. Now, you still got to coach them hard and develop them, etc. But great players are going to make you a great coach. Now, once you develop a culture and your system at the school you're at, then you go recruit the kids to fit that system. But in the meantime, you might have to make some adjustments and some tweaks here or there to make sure until you get those players in to be successful. Coach Bowden used to say, at Florida State, we have different problems here than back in the day, Wake Forest and Duke. We used to beat them like 40-0. They have different problems than we do. We have 5-star kids. They might feel a little entitled. We got to get after them, yada, yada, yada. Over there, they don't have those kids. They got to coach harder. They got different problems than we do. So let's not screw it up. Let's not get too smart and outsmart ourselves with great players. So you're right. There's a certain degree to keeping certain things simple. I remember any time we ever got in trouble with Florida State, Coach Andrews' go-to defense was jet robber, which is basically 4-3 with a robber coverage behind a low hole, deep hole player, man free. When all chaos was going on, he'd come back, settle the team down. We're going to jet robber. That's it. And we're going to play it, which we know best. We got people that can do it. We're going to get it done. So sometimes simpler is better, especially if you got the players to do it.
And Coach, I want to kind of close out this segment by asking you a final question. It's in regards to talent. Did you, I mean, especially when you got at Rutgers and you got at Hawaii, and I think in those areas, scheme might have been just a little bit more important because, you didn't have, you had to play with, talent that was, you didn't have a bunch of 5 stars on the roster. Did you, when you were out there recruiting, was it more important to recruit for the scheme, or was it as important to say, you know what, this guy is good. I think this guy can play, and it's up to us as coaches to figure out how to best fit him in. Did you recruit some square pegs that were so good that it's like, you know what, if I can't figure out how to make this guy successful, I'm not a good enough coach?
Correct. So what happens, it's kind of a two-part because it's relevant to who you play. So when you're at the Rutgers and the Hawaii's, you're not playing the SEC, the AC, you're playing different breed of guys. So now your talent level might not, and your recruiting level might not be on par with those other places. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you're right. Sometimes you got to look at overall, evaluate your personnel on your team. Say, you know what, we don't have any players anywhere. We just got to get the best players available. And if they fit, we'll make them fit into, or we'll change what we have to do to make them fit into whatever makes them the best they can be. But we got to get great players first. Then we can develop the culture and then start bringing kids in to fit what we do. So I think you're correct in saying that is at some point early in your taking over a program, you got to get the best players available and figure out what they do best to make it work for your offense or defense. Then once you're able to recruit kids on a regular basis to develop your culture, then you kind of, recruit them to fit what they do best to help you with your scheme. But again, it's all relevant because in Hawaii, we didn't play SEC caliber players. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 we play SEC or Oregon or something like that, because for certain reasons. But the rest of the Mountain West or whatever it was all relevant.
Coach, as always, I appreciate your input on this. It's always extremely interesting to hear about these different formations and gaps and schemes and the thoughts that go in behind them. When we come back, we're going to talk about recruiting. The state of Florida is loaded at a defensive line position. I know I'm shocked. What about you? We'll be back. We're back with the Fishcast, and we're camp season is official this year after last year where camps were kind of, very much hit or miss and very protected, and a lot of them ended up being canceled. This year, everybody's going all out with the camps, and Under Armour's got a full national schedule. They headed down to Miami this weekend. Oh boy, the Miami Under Armour camp is always one of the most highly anticipated camps of the year because you get pretty much all the top kids in Florida go down there. Then you'll get some of them kids in Georgia, some of the kids in Louisiana and Alabama that want some, and even some kids in Texas that say, you know what, I want to get a piece of this action, I'll join down there. But you were down there, Fish. I mean, there's nothing more impressive than the Under Armour camp in Miami because it's just like all the superstars are in one place.
There's no question. I didn't really get a chance to watch a whole lot. I got there, I caught the end of it, but when you go look at the talent this year in the state of Florida, and we're going to discuss it, almost 50 Division I offers have already been given out to defensive linemen. I mean, that's just for Division I. That's almost unheard of. You always have good D linemen, but this is a year that you're talking there may be 3 or 4 5-star defensive linemen. The one kid that's moving up really quick is Nigella Kelly from Dillard. Here's a guy that was a 3-star that he has stepped up his game, and he had another good performance from what everybody's saying at the Under Armour combine today. The one guy that had a good camp, and I'm not surprised he's from your neck of the woods, is Mario Eugenio from Gaither. I think this kid's a real sleeper. One of those second-tier Power 5 teams is going to get a really, really good football player. I told coaches this year, listen, you can find yourself a potential NFL draft pick at the 20 to 30 range this year in the state of Florida on the D line. That's how loaded this year's class is. You've got a ton of guys, and then you go in overall, it's a very deep and talented class. One of the guys I really like, and he had a very good camp today, is Jacoby Spells. If this kid was a wide receiver, he may be the top rated receiver in the state of Florida or one of the top 2. He's gone over to corner. He reminds me a lot of Xavier Rhodes, who was a wide receiver at Norland, ended up going to Florida State and becoming a first-round pick. This is the year we talked about it. The 3 Florida schools should all have classes hovering around that top 10. There's no excuse. I don't care how good or bad of a year. This is just one of those years where you're going to probably have 350 to 400 kids go D1 and a lot of high-quality Power 5 kids.
I tell you, you mentioned Mario Eugenio, and I'm gonna tell you this, and this is if UCF or USF, and if they had hired Coach Demo, if Charlie Strong would have hired Coach Demo, he might still have a job right now. First of all, if he'd have hired Coach Demo, Coach Demo will tell you Mario Eugenio would be the guy that you would be hanging on if you were at USF or UCF, because you look at a kid like that, and that's the type of kid that can get you back into a New Year's Six bowl game. Having a type of player like that, that's going to be an interesting thing with his recruitment. I mean, I think he's a Power 5 kid. There's no doubt about it. But I think he's the type of kid that if you're Jeff Scott at USF, you got to be thinking, you know what? We get this kid. We're winning. We're going through a stretch where we can have a couple of 10-win seasons. So we're going to go all out for this type of player.
Right. I mean, he's very similar to like a JPP or the other kid that they brought in. What was the other DN that was really a big-time kid with JPP? The kid was from Pensacola. He's one of those under-the-radar guys that could end up in the first or second round of the draft. It's such a loaded year that he's going to get overlooked. And somebody like USF, UCF, Iowa State, Charlie Partridge at Pittsburgh, somebody's going to come in and steal this kid. And everybody's going to say 3 years from now, how did he get out of the state of Florida? Because it's such a loaded year. He's under the radar. He goes to school. Gaither actually has a D tackle that may get recruited. Reminds me of Tay Cody that played at Alabama. Gaither is sneaky talented this year. I don't know what they'll do in the Tampa area, but they've got a few pieces this year, and this is one of them. I think I'm really high on this kid, and he had a great day again today at this Under Armour combine. He's long, he's athletic, he gets low, and it's hard to block for bigger guys. He stays low. He's kind of like one of those old school Florida State guys, whether it was Bower or Radar Wilson. They stayed low and they were able to bend right underneath an offensive tackle. And this is a type of kid that Demo would love.
It's funny you say that, Corey, about Charlie Strong, because a number of years back, I was recruiting a defensive end out of Orlando, and I went to go watch him play basketball. And I'm sitting up there with the kid's mom. I turn around, who comes up and sits on the other side of her? Charlie Strong. I said, oh, man, I'm going to be in a war with this guy. He was an assistant coach at Florida at the time. I said, I'm going to be in a war for this kid. The kid ended up going to Florida. But, as a coach, I have to say I use these camps differently from what a lot of other people use them for. We use them as another recruiting tool to be able to recruit and see a kid. So if it fell under the NCAA guidelines, but I was allowed out to go evaluate a kid at a camp, then I would use it. I already knew who the kids were. So I would be looking for those 4 or 5 kids, be, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Try to build a relationship with them. And now what they ended up doing is saying, okay, Division III school can have 4 or 5 Division I schools come to the school and have a camp there as well. So what these Division I people did, they would invite all the Division I kids they're recruiting and would like get to them somehow. So they go to the camp. So those guys would show up at the camp and they recruit. That's all they would do. And they would have 2 or 3 guys on their staff look around for guys that they didn't know about, take some notes and say, hey, we found 2 kids. But they already knew when they went to these camps, whether the ones I just talked about or NCAA allowed us to be there, within the recruiting guidelines. We went there looking for kids we already knew to continue to build a relationship with and talk to them and use them as another stepping stone for a recruiting tool instead of finding talent. But there will always be 1 or 2 kids at these camps that you would find that you didn't have on your list.
Colin McCarthy was one of those.
Correct.
That you came out of Clearwater Central Catholic.
Absolutely.
You were really high on him. He blew up, and Miami came in late in the process and took a flyer on him, and he had a very good career before ending up in college. But he was one of those kids from that, that Tampa, St. Pete area that flew under the radar.
There was at Middleton. Corey remembers it was at Middleton.
Yep.
But see, a lot of kids I would recruit early on and say, man, I could identify a kid very early. And everybody be like, slow to move. Then all of a sudden, everybody's offering that kid. And then he goes on, that kid ended up going to University of Miami.
Too late by then.
It's too late. You got to act now. If you really believe your evaluation, you got to act now and get that kid into the program, get him offered and try to get him committed. Because other than that, once he's exposed, he has good exposure, then it's wide open, man.
All right, Fish, we're going to close out this segment. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, put you on the spot. Who's the kid that is on nobody's radar right now and I'm not going to say they're going to blow up by the end of the summer, but they're going to be known by the end of the summer. And behind that, I want you to give me the underclassman, a 2023 or a 2024 kid that is a little unknown right now that you think is going to be big time.
Well, Corey, the top players for 2023 and 24 that are going to probably fly under the radar, but show up over the next couple of months, especially during spring football. One of those players is Dylan Stevenson. He actually got an offer from FSU in Miami recently. He was at Westminster Christian, transferred over to Killian. Coach Derek Gibson got a good one, and he's already showing himself out real well at these camps and stuff. So he's one of those guys. Another guy that I believe will show himself in the next couple months is Antonio Jackson, a DB out of Dillard. A sleeper prospect on the offensive side of the ball is Ryan Bullard. He's a running back. He was at St. Brendan's as a freshman and a sophomore, is going to move over to Killian, give them one of the best backfields probably in Dade County. Coach Gibson continues to add pieces to that pie or puzzle. They're going to have a very good team this year at Killian. One of the surprise players in Broward County, you turn on his film, is Hakeem Williams. Kid's a big, talented, fast wide receiver from Stranahan High School. Big physical kid, can run real well. He's another guy that does not, have a ton going on right now, but I think once he gets exposed and his film gets out there more and more, he will be a player that, a lot of schools are going to take notice of. And the final one is Kamani Alexander out of Baylin Jesuit. Baylin had a running back, Don Chaney Jr., that went to University of Miami. This kid comes in last year, plays as a 8th grader, fills the void. It was a big void by Chaney leaving, but they're going to have an opportunity. This kid's going to have the opportunity to show his skill sets over the next few years, and he will probably be one of Baylin Jesuit's top prospects.
See, Corey, I know you and Fish will hate me for saying this. You'll hate me for saying this, but you guys have boots on the ground. And every time I came down and I was allowed to come down to recruit, I valued Fish's opinion. I valued your opinion because you saw these kids more than once and you were down there all the time looking at these kids. Now, I ultimately made the final decision on whether to recruit them or not. But man, it gave me a different perspective on kids that weren't getting recruited, that were the kids you guys were talking about, under the radar kids. Hey, you should go look at that kid because he's going to be something. He's going to be a 5-star. He's going to be a highly recruited kid before he was. And I valued those opinions. And that's why I really say, you guys, I enjoy talking to you because you know your stuff.
Well, we got one more segment left. We're going to talk about some of the news that's happened around college football this past week. Jackson State goes to
Deion.
Les Miles might get fired. And what are they doing in Texas? Haven't they learned anything? All right, we're back for the final Fishcast segment of the week, talking about some news in college football. A couple of news items. We're going to start off with the positive stuff first. Our man Deion Sanders, 2-0 at Jacksonville State. I actually saw most of this game against Grambling. They end up going up 27-14 at the half. Grambling has a great third quarter, ends up taking the lead 28-27 early in the fourth quarter. JSU comes right back down and scores. I think it took them 5 plays, take the lead. Deion doesn't go for 2 there, rookie mistake. Their kicker's horrible, by the way, so they missed the kick anyway. They end up getting the ball back up 33-28. They get in a goal line possession situation, hand the ball off like you're supposed to. The running back fumbles before he hits the goal line. So now they come back the other way. Grambling's down the field. You're listening to the announcers say, well, they got to let him score. You know, you get the 2 minutes, 90 seconds, 1 minute. Got to let him score. Lo and behold, Jackson State holds it tight. They get it down. Grambling on a second goal, fumbles. They muff the handoff, fumble. JSU recovers. Deion goes 2-0. It's a road win. It's a conference win. It's a win against a team that Jackson State had lost 9 out of the last 10 against. Hadn't beaten them since 2012. I text you a lot during this game, Fish, and you're like, the one thing that sticks out to me more than anything, I tell you, is that Jackson State doesn't get penalized. They do not. There's no pre-snap penalties. There's not a lot of sideline garbage. They look prepared. I mean, you're going to get penalties during the course of a game, but they're not the false starts. They're not the delays. They don't look confused. They look like they know what they're doing. I'm impressed with the Deion Sanders. I'm impressed with Coach Prime. I'm impressed with his staff. I'm impressed with the way this team carries themselves. I got to admit.
I'm telling you, he's got a brand. And when he turns that brand into results, it's something special. I heard him say something to his team the other day. I invested in you. I want a return on my investment. And he's so true when he says that. A lot of things, you can't take away from what the man experienced and what he's been through, because he brings that to coaching. And he's not afraid to hire good coaches around him. He's not intimidated or anything like that or threatened by any guys. He's Deion Sanders. So he's going to hire the best coaches around him that's available out there for him. And I think this, even though it's HBCUs and he's doing a great job and he's bringing notoriety to that and all that stuff, I think still this is a stepping stone for his future.
I think Deion is on the fast track of being a Division I coach. Listen, if he wins, what AD is, and he can recruit, what AD is not going to pull the trigger on him? I mean, heck, they're hiring guys from these conferences that are, they're hiring them from, group of 5 schools. Why wouldn't you take a flyer on somebody that kids are going to want to play for? I mean, can you imagine him going into Miami Northwestern or a Carroll City or any school in Jacksonville, and he goes into an inner city school and he's like, hey, I want you to come play for me? That kid's going to be like, when do I sign up? It's all about recruiting. And I really, really believe that I think Deion's one of those people that, because he's so loud and brash, they think, oh man, this guy's not smart or this or that. He's fooling those people because he's a very, very smart guy. He wouldn't have taken this job. Listen, I spoke to somebody that said that, and I don't know how true it is. I didn't know he even interviewed for the FSU job, but supposedly he interviewed for the FSU job and was very impressive. Now, my source on it, I don't know how accurate they are, but I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy's been in football a very long time. He's been around winning programs. this is a guy that when came out of college, he knew how to brand himself before anybody else. I mean, remember, this is a guy that branded himself in college when it wasn't cool to brand yourself. And then he went to the NFL and he goes, you know what? I'm going to play for the marquee franchises. He knew, like, all right, I'm going to go play for the Niners. I'm going to go play for the Dallas Cowboys. He's a very smart guy. He takes his time. He's very deliberate in his decisions. He didn't make this decision to go to this school and go, you know what? I'm just going there because he went there going, hey, I have a plan. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And you can laugh, but he's going to end up probably going undefeated this year. And you're going to watch. There's going to be some schools. If he goes in the fall and has another good year in the next coaching cycle, Deion's going to be one of the top names on that coaching list.
The guy took a helicopter from the Falcons to the Braves when he was in Atlanta to play football and baseball. The guy branded himself. He gets results. He's not intimidated. He's not threatened by anything. He's not threatened by having successful coaches around him. He's Deion Sanders, man. And the bottom line is, I really, truly believe this guy might end up at Florida State before it's all said and done. If the trajectory goes the way I think it should go, he'll end up there.
Yeah, well, you're not the only person who thinks that, Coach D. There might be somebody else on this call that believes that right now. We're going to go with the second news item. USA Today put out a scathing, an absolute mammoth of a report on all kinds of issues that happened at LSU from about 2013 to 2017. All kinds of sexual harassment. You got accusations of Les Miles. He's kissing students. He's trying to get them to go back to his condo. He had been warned about this several times. Apparently, after the 2011 season, he basically was told not to fraternize with any female that was on campus that didn't work in the football office. Joe Oliva, the AD in 2013, said that they had enough cause to fire him, basically, based on everything that they knew, which they hid. Now he's been placed on administrative leave at Kansas by AD Jeff Long because they're trying to get more out of it. I suggest the best punishment for him would be to coach Kansas. They're awful. so I think that might be the punishment, is actually leave him in there and coach. What do you guys think?
Oh, man. You got to love it, Les. Between him and Petrino, they just can't. Petrino got addicted to those volleyball shorts. And this one, I don't know what he's thinking, the Mad Hatter. I mean, he's odd. The guy's eating grass on TV, but I don't know. These guys can't help themselves. Trust me, we're all men. We think crazy. It's one thing thinking about it. It's another acting it out. And these guys, listen, if I made the money they made, I would never leave my house. I'm just telling you. You have so much to risk. I mean, these guys are making $5, $6, $7 million a year. Like, bring the party to your house. If I'm going to do something with someone, I'm going to be like, listen, you're signing this contract to understand that, hey, listen, everything's consensual. Everything's good. Like, these guys are just flat out clowns. I mean, it's just amazing how irresponsible. I don't know, man. I don't get it.
But I think one thing you said, Fish, was really important. Just stay home.
Just stay home. Like, nothing good happens after 2:00 in the morning. Like, I'm just, just stay home. I mean, honestly, you could bring the party to your house if you really want it that bad. And like I said, I'd buy a lot of cameras and I'd have a lot of contracts. I honestly, I'd have everybody sign a contract, man. If I'm making that much money, I'm not going to risk my livelihood over some girl. I'm not going to do it. I mean, honestly, it's just stupid.
Absolutely. Final news topic of the day. And my favorite one of the group is Texas and this dumb song of theirs. So a bunch of the higher end boosters, they felt the need to just email the president this horrible racist junk, and you can read the emails if you want. The Texas president, who isn't the boldest guy in the world, called them extreme. He wasn't willing to say, "Hey, we don't need this garbage at our school." He's just like, "Oh, they're extreme and they don't represent all the boosters." First of all, yes, they do. They represent them all because they're the guys that are giving you all the money. But what I don't get, and here's what I'm gonna say: Alabama figured it out. You can't be good at the football and be overtly racist. You can be hiddenly racist if you want to, but you can't be overtly racist and be good at the football. Bear Bryant taught them that. This is one thing that Steve Sarkisian is going to have to teach these Texas boosters. Hey, either you want to have a good football team or you want to go out there and be rich, dumb, and racist. But you can't be both right now. And, one of the great things, one of the things that Nick Saban did that no one ever mentions, one of the reasons that Alabama is the animal that it is that when he walked into those doors, when he left the Miami Dolphins and walked into those doors, and, you had all these millionaire boosters and these guys and these diamond boosters and whatever, he told them all to get the F out. Get out of my face. Get away from my football. His point was that you don't pay to have an opinion. You pay for success on the field. I'll give you success on the field. You shut up. And that's it. And that's all he's ever dealt with. That's why he doesn't have any problems at Alabama, because he told them all to get out of his face. He doesn't care what you think. He'll show up at your little stupid parties once a year. He'll smile. He'll shake hands with you. He'll take pictures. Don't ask him what happens on the football field. That's his territory, and he's going to win a lot of games.
I agree with that. Although it's the Island of Misfit Toys, Rehab U, not for players, but for coaches. They seem to all go there to get their rehab, and off they go. And he does a good job of getting it done for him. He really does.
Oh man.
But will Texas ever get it? Will Texas ever understand that? Will they ever get a coach that can walk in there and say, "Hey, get out of my face. I don't care about your stupid song. I don't care about your dumb little traditions. You want to win a football game? You want to beat Oklahoma? Then you'll leave me the hell alone."
Corey, the biggest problem you have at Texas, it's a national brand and they recruit in-state only. We've talked about this. Until they understand they're a national brand and they're going to go after the big dogs, they can roll a new coach. Listen, when Jordan Shipley and his 22 brothers keep getting scholarships, they're not going to win. I mean, I don't know how many Shipleys have to go through Texas. They're the friends and family network, that school. They hand everybody a scholarship and their brothers scholarships and uncle. They probably have 20 kids that can't play college football, on their roster at Texas. These kids should be walking on. But that's Texas. They don't realize what they are. And I still don't believe they think they know what they are. They think, oh, we'll just get a guy from Alabama, we'll win. But it takes more than that. You have to get out of the way, like you said, Alabama did. These boosters want to be so involved. I think that's a big problem what you have at Tennessee is, I've heard their boosters are very involved. It's like, you just get out of the way. Let the coach do his job,
Their boosters are the reason that they hired Jeremy Pruitt instead of Greg Schiano. You see how well that worked out for them.
Yeah, it's just stupid, man. When boosters get involved, nothing good happens.
Hey, you better get some Florida kids on your roster if you want to win a national championship. That's all I got to say.
Demo's biased, man. He's more biased than I am. Listen, I'll I like cherry picking some kids from other states, but you may be more Florida biased than I am, and you don't live down there.
Because the recipe works. I've seen it work. I believe in it. No matter where I've been, once I got Florida kids there, changed the culture.
Hey,
changed everything about the program.
When Charlie Strong was at Texas, his starting D tackle was from Lakeland. His starting corner was from Booker T. These kids can play, but I think Texas has the brand. We've talked about this. They didn't go after the Robert Condichis. They didn't go after the James Wilders. They didn't go after the Gurleys. They go after guys in their state, and they continue to make the same mistake. And their boosters want to be friends with the coach. And you know what? I still feel. I think they're wash, rinse, repeat. It's going to be the same thing over and over at that school.
It's hard to turn down a job though when they're giving you whatever they gave the guy, millions and millions of dollars just to be the figurehead. It's hard. It's
Oh,
hard.
you
But
don't
you're right. There's
you don't turn
like,
it down, but
Auburn's another place. There's a few places that you just can't get out of the boosters' way. Can't get out of their way.
yeah.
So to close this out, Steve Sarkisian in Texas, is he going to be able to get past all this junk, or is this going to be like with every other Texas coach? Is all the silly outside of football stuff? Is that really what's going to be what takes him down? Is that going to be what keeps the program down? It's all the silliness that has nothing to do with what's on the field.
That's a good question. I just look at where somebody's been prior. Was it Washington State and USC? What happened? But he went to Alabama, Rehab U, and now he's out there getting millions. So hopefully it'll work out for him.
Well, I think it's better if they're good, but I see more of the same.
I tend to agree with you. I don't think Texas gets it. I just don't think they'll get it anytime soon. But we get it. We get that you've spent 90 minutes with us, and we're ready to go.
Well,
Another great week and another great Fish cast. I
Yep.
appreciate the time spent with you, Fish, and the time spent with you, Coach Demarest.
There you go.
we,
Hey, I love it. Like I said, it's always great chopping it up with guys that are very, very knowledgeable about this recruiting, about football in general. It's really great to do that.
well, I appreciate it, Coach. We'll talk next week.
You got it, guys. Stay
Take it
tuned.
easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.